Pain can become salvation when guided by devoted hands. In the shadows of tall pines, a forgotten church stood with windows that seemed to weep on moonless nights. What happened within those walls remained whispered about for decades afterwards. No official ever wanted to document what they found. It was the autumn of 1954 when the first reports emerged from the small town of Millbrook, Connecticut. The smiles that remained on their faces would haunt the living for generations. Attention! The case you are about to hear has been concealed for decades. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is at this exact moment, because this story began at exactly the same hour. The town of Millbrook had always been known for its particular quietness, not the peaceful kind that tourists seek, but the heavy silence that feels like something unsaid. According to documents preserved in the town archive, the arrival of Father Emmanuel Blackwood in the spring of 1952 changed everything. He came with recommendations from church authorities that years later would claim they never sent such letters. The church had been abandoned for almost 7 years before his arrival. Local records indicate that the previous priest had left after what was described as a nervous collapse. The wooden structure stood on the outskirts of town, surrounded by pine trees that seemed to absorb all sound. Residents would later testify that even bird songs seemed to fade when approaching the church grounds. Father Blackwood was described as tall and thin, with unusually pale skin and eyes of different colors, one brown, one blue. He spoke softly, but those who heard him preach said his words somehow lingered in your mind for days afterward. According to the testimonies collected in 1957, he had a way of looking at people that made them feel both important and afraid. His first sermon, delivered to a congregation of just 17 people, contained themes that would later become significant. A witness statement from Martha Collins, filed in the county records, quoted him saying, "True holiness can only be achieved through the purification of suffering. Our bodies are vessels of sin. Only through pain can we truly be cleansed." But it was what he said next that should have alarmed someone. "I have been sent here to save you, to show you the path through pain to eternal joy." Within 3 months, his congregation had grown to over 70 members. The church, once nearly forgotten, now held services 3 times a week. Wednesday evenings, Friday at midnight, Sunday mornings. Some residents began to notice changes in those who attended regularly. According to a statement from Dr. Harold Winters, dated July 7, 1954, "Several of my patients who have joined Father Blackwood's congregation have begun refusing medical treatment. They speak of purification through suffering. One woman with a serious infection declined antibiotics, saying that the pain was making her holy." The doctor's notes continue with observations that would later be sealed by court order. "What troubles me most is the look in their eyes, a strange serenity that seems disconnected from their physical condition. They smile constantly, even when I know they must be in considerable pain." Local shop owners noticed other changes. Members of the congregation began to dress differently, always in buttoned collars, long sleeves, high necklines, even in the summer heat. A report filed by Sheriff James Carson noted that several children from these families had stopped attending school. Parents claimed they were being educated at the church, but what was happening inside the church remained unknown to outsiders. The building had been renovated soon after Father Blackwood's arrival. New walls were built. The windows were covered with heavy curtains, and most notably, the basement was expanded. The first real indication that something was deeply wrong came in the fall of 1954. A teenage boy named Thomas Wilkins ran away from home after his parents had joined the church. He was found 3 days later, hiding in the woods outside of town. According to the police report, the boy was severely dehydrated and showing signs of psychological distress. What he told authorities would trigger the first official investigation. But by then, it might have already been too late. Thomas's statement, partially redacted in the official documents, described what he had witnessed in the church basement. They have these rooms down there, small rooms with no windows. Father Blackwood calls them purification chambers. I saw my parents go into them willingly. I heard sounds, but when they came out hours later, they were smiling. Always smiling. The boy went on to describe rituals involving what he called cleansing tools, objects designed to inflict carefully controlled pain. Father says that each person has different sins, so each person needs different purification. He talks to each member alone to identify their deepest sins. Then he prescribes their purification method. Sheriff Carson, initially skeptical of the boy's claims, decided to visit the church himself. His official report, dated October 12, 1954, describes a cordial meeting with Father Blackwood. The priest was cooperative and showed me around the main church area. When I asked about the basement, he explained it was used for storage and private prayer. He showed me several small rooms with prayer benches and religious icons. Nothing seemed amiss. What the sheriff failed to note in his official report, but later confessed in a sealed testimony, was that he never actually saw the entire basement. There was a locked door at the end of a hallway. Blackwood said it led to the heating system. I believed him. I wish to God I hadn't. 2 weeks after the sheriff's visit, a woman named Eleanor Hayes appeared at the police station in the middle of the night. According to the desk sergeant's log, she was wearing a high-necked dress despite the cool weather, and was smiling in a manner that appeared unnatural given her physical condition. Eleanor's arms were covered in small, systematic burns. When questioned about them, she reportedly said, "These are my stepping stones to holiness. Father Blackwood has shown me how to burn away my sins. Each mark brings me closer to purity." The woman refused medical treatment and would not file charges. She left the station still smiling. The desk sergeant noted that she returned to the church. By November of 1954, rumors about Father Blackwood's congregation had spread throughout the town and into neighboring communities. Parents reported that their adult children had cut off contact after joining. Local businesses noticed that some congregation members had stopped showing up for work. The church itself had become increasingly isolated, with members now living communally on the property. And then the letters began to appear. Families across New England received handwritten notes from their relatives in the congregation. Each letter followed a similar pattern. They spoke of finding true purpose, of achieving purification through carefully administered pain, of feeling closer to divine grace than ever before. And each letter ended with the same phrase, "Soon we will achieve perfect holiness. I have never been happier." What troubled recipients most was not the content, but the handwriting. Family members described it as mechanical, different, as if written by someone else using their loved one's hand. An investigation by the state police was finally launched in early December of 1954, but official records show a troubling lack of urgency. Interviews with former officers years later would reveal that several key officials in the county had relatives in the congregation. Some suggested that Father Blackwood had influential connections that managed to delay and limit the scope of the investigation. On December 18th, State Police Detective Marcus Bennett arrived in Millbrook with orders to conduct a thorough investigation. His daily reports, preserved in state archives, detail a systematic approach to understanding what was happening at the church. Bennett began by interviewing former congregation members who had left early in Father Blackwood's tenure. One such interview with Robert Palmer, dated December 20th, contained disturbing details. At first, it was just talk of spiritual purification through controlled discomfort. Prayer positions held for hours, fasting, cold water immersion. But then Blackwood started having private sessions with each member. He called it sin diagnosis. After my session, he told me my sins required more intensive purification than others. He wanted me to sign a covenant giving him complete authority over my purification process. That's when I left, Palmer's statement continued. The truly frightening thing wasn't what he was asking us to do. It was how eager people were to comply. My wife, she stayed, said I was rejecting salvation. I haven't seen her in 7 months, but I received a letter last week. She said she's almost achieved perfect holiness, said the pain has nearly cleansed her completely. Detective Bennett's investigation gained momentum when he discovered financial records showing large purchases of medical supplies by the church. According to invoices found in the town records, Father Blackwood had ordered surgical tools, pharmaceutical-grade chemicals, and specialized restraint equipment. All supposedly for a medical mission, the church was preparing. On December 23rd, Bennett requested a warrant to search the church property, particularly the basement areas that had been expanded. The request was granted after some bureaucratic delay that Bennett noted as unusual in his personal journal. The events of December 24th, 1954, would later be partially redacted from official records. What remains are fragmented reports from the officers who accompanied Detective Bennett to the church that morning. According to these accounts, Father Blackwood greeted the officers at the door, seemingly unsurprised by their arrival. He was described as unnaturally calm and smiling throughout the interaction. He allowed them to enter but requested they respect the privacy of his congregation, who he said were engaged in special Christmas Eve purification rituals. The search of the main church area revealed nothing unusual except for the silence. Despite Blackwood's claim of ongoing rituals, no sounds could be heard from anywhere in the building. When questioned about this, Blackwood reportedly said, "True devotion requires perfect silence, even in pain." It was when the officers insisted on accessing the basement that Father Blackwood's demeanor reportedly changed. According to Officer Thomas Riley's statement, the priest stopped smiling for the first time. He told us the basement was a sacred space, accessible only to those who had been properly prepared. Detective Bennett informed him the warrant covered all areas of the property, including any underground portions. What the officers found in the basement has been heavily redacted in the official reports. Surviving fragments describe a complex of rooms far larger than the church above. Officer Riley's account mentions hospital-like facilities and purification chambers with specialized equipment for administering controlled pain. Most disturbing were the rooms they found behind the locked door that Sheriff Carson had never passed. According to a sealed testimony given years later by Officer Riley, there were 12 identical rooms. In each one, a member of the congregation sat in a specially designed chair. Each person was connected to devices I cannot adequately describe, and every single one of them was smiling wider than should be humanly possible. The medical examiner's preliminary report, portions of which survived the later classifications, indicated that all 12 individuals had been subjected to systematic physical stress designed to inflict maximum pain without causing loss of consciousness. Yet toxicology showed no presence of pain medication or sedatives. They were fully aware of their condition. When Detective Bennett asked Father Blackwood to explain, the priest reportedly said only, "They have achieved what they came for. Perfect holiness through perfect suffering. The smile is the body's recognition of true grace." The records of what happened next are contradictory. Official reports state that Father Blackwood and 37 congregation members were taken into custody. Medical care was provided to those who needed it. The church was closed pending a full investigation, but sealed testimonies and personal journals tell a different story. According to Officer Riley's later statements, by the time additional medical personnel arrived, every member of the congregation present that day, 59 people in total, wore the same unnatural smile. All refused treatment. All claimed they had never been happier. Most troubling was what happened to those 12 individuals found in the specialized rooms. Medical records indicate they were transported to Westfield State Hospital for treatment and psychiatric evaluation. The attending physician, Dr. Eliza Montgomery, noted in her initial assessment, patients exhibit profound psychological alteration. Despite extensive physical trauma, they report no pain. Instead, they describe feelings of extreme euphoria and spiritual transcendence. Most disturbing is the persistent facial rictus, a fixed smile that does not fade even during sleep. Father Emmanuel Blackwood was held for questioning for 72 hours. Transcripts of these interrogations were later classified, but fragments suggest the priest revealed little. He maintained that he had done nothing wrong, that every member of his congregation had participated willingly in what he called the path to perfect holiness. Most disturbing was his final recorded statement before being released due to what court documents called insufficient evidence of criminal activity. According to the transcript, Blackwood said, "What you have witnessed is merely the beginning. The smiles you find so disturbing are the visible sign of inner transformation. My work in Millbrook is complete, but my mission continues. There are many more souls seeking the purification only I can provide." Father Blackwood disappeared the day after his release. A nationwide alert was issued, but no confirmed sightings were ever recorded. The church in Millbrook was eventually demolished in 1956 after a suspicious fire damaged much of the structure. Excavation of the basement revealed additional rooms that had not been discovered during the initial investigation. The contents of these rooms remain classified. The aftermath in Millbrook lasted for years. According to town records, 23 former congregation members remained in the area. All maintained that they had participated willingly in Father Blackwood's purification rituals. All insisted they had benefited spiritually from the experience. And according to local medical records, all continued to display what became known locally as the Blackwood smile, a fixed facial expression that doctors' notes describe as seeming to originate from something other than natural happiness. Perhaps most unsettling were the children. 7 children from congregation families had been present at the church, but kept separate from the more extreme rituals. According to social service records, these children were initially placed in foster care. Psychological evaluations described them as unusually compliant and exhibiting advanced understanding of religious concepts inappropriate for their age. Within 6 months, all 7 children had been returned to family members. Caseworkers noted that despite intensive therapy, the children continued to speak of Father Blackwood with reverence. One report quotes a 9-year-old girl saying, "Father showed us that hurting can be holy. Sometimes at night, I practice the small purifications he taught us. It makes me feel closer to heaven." The broader investigation into Father Blackwood's background revealed troubling gaps. Church authorities in 3 different states denied having sent recommendation letters to Millbrook. Seminary records showed no graduate by that name in the previous 20 years. The only concrete evidence of his past was found in newspaper clippings from a small town in Oregon, dated 1947, mentioning a visiting priest who had held special healing services before moving on. A subsequent investigation in Oregon found that several attendees of those services had later disappeared. Local records indicated they had moved away to seek spiritual guidance. None were ever located. As the years passed, public interest in the Millbrook incident faded. Official records were sealed under various pretexts. Those directly involved rarely spoke of what they had witnessed. Detective Marcus Bennett left law enforcement in 1956 and moved to Arizona. His personal journals, discovered after his death in 1972, revealed a man haunted by what he had seen in the church basement. In one entry, dated June 12, 1957, Bennett wrote, "I still see their smiles when I close my eyes. Not expressions of joy, but something else entirely, as if their faces were windows, and something new was looking out through them, something that enjoyed the pain Father Blackwood had taught them to embrace. I find myself wondering if Blackwood was actually curing spiritual sickness, or if he was spreading a new kind of infection, one that transforms agony into ecstasy. The 12 individuals found in the specialized rooms became known in classified documents as the perfected. According to sealed medical records, all 12 remained at Westfield State Hospital for observation. Treatments ranging from therapy to electroconvulsive procedures had no effect on their condition. They maintained their unnatural smiles. They spoke of their experience as transformative rather than traumatic. And most disturbing, according to nursing logs, they continued to inflict small, systematic injuries on themselves when left unobserved. A research team led by Dr. Montgomery conducted extensive studies of these patients between 1955 and 1959. Her findings, classified until 1978, described a condition she termed transcendent pain response, a fundamental rewiring of the brain's pain processing centers. According to her notes, these individuals no longer experience pain as aversive. Instead, painful stimuli trigger what appears to be a profound, euphoric response. Brain imaging shows activation patterns similar to those observed in extreme religious experiences or certain drug-induced states. Dr. Montgomery's research took an unsettling turn when she discovered that this condition might be communicable. In a heavily redacted section of her report, she noted that 2 hospital staff who had worked closely with the perfected for over a year began to exhibit similar symptoms. Both reported experiencing pleasurable sensations during minor painful events and were observed smiling in a manner similar to the patients. Both were immediately removed from the study. By 1960, public records indicate that the Millbrook incident had been officially resolved. The church property was rezoned and eventually became a public park. Former congregation members who remained in the area gradually reintegrated into the community, though local accounts suggest they were always regarded with suspicion. The last official document relating to the case was a death certificate for Eleanor Hayes, one of the first identified victims who passed away in 1968 from causes listed as natural. But unofficial records tell a different story. According to a sealed FBI report dated 1963, investigators had been tracking a pattern of incidents across 5 states that bore similarities to the Millbrook case. Small religious groups forming around charismatic leaders who preach salvation through controlled suffering. Disappearances of members who had supposedly achieved some form of perfection, and most tellingly, reports of the characteristic fixed smile. None of these investigations conclusively linked these groups to Father Blackwood, but internal memos suggested a connection. One agent wrote, "While we have no confirmation that Emmanuel Blackwood is directly involved in these groups, the philosophical and methodological similarities are too significant to ignore. It appears his theology of purification through pain has spread beyond Millbrook, either through his direct influence or through those he previously converted." The last confirmed sighting of anyone from the original 12 perfected was in 1967. According to a classified report, a woman identified as Margaret Wilson, who had disappeared from Westfield State Hospital during a power outage in 1961, was observed leading a small religious gathering in a rural area of West Virginia. Witnesses described her as speaking about the path of holy pain while maintaining what they called an eerily beautiful smile. By the time authorities investigated, the group had disbanded and Wilson had vanished. Perhaps the most disturbing epilogue to the Millbrook incident came in the form of personal correspondence between Dr. Montgomery and a colleague at Johns Hopkins University. In a letter dated March 3, 1969, Montgomery wrote, "I have come to believe that what we witnessed in Millbrook was not merely a cult or a case of extreme religious manipulation. The neurological changes we documented in The Perfected suggest something more profound. Blackwood somehow discovered a method to fundamentally alter how the human brain processes pain, transforming it from a warning system into a reward mechanism. The theological framework was merely a delivery system for what amounts to a complete rewiring of our most basic survival instinct. I find myself wondering what would happen if this knowledge spread beyond these isolated incidents. What would become of humanity if pain became pleasure? Would we still be human at all?" Dr. Montgomery's research was discontinued in 1970, and all materials were placed under seal. She retired from medicine the following year and lived in seclusion until her death in 1976. According to her nephew, who was interviewed for a historical journal in 2001, her final years were spent in a state of perpetual anxiety. "She became obsessed with smiles," he recalled. "She would stare at people who were smiling and whisper, 'Is it real? Is it natural?' She made me promise never to smile unless I truly meant it." The physical evidence from the Millbrook incident was supposedly destroyed in a records facility fire in 1971. Official statements classified the entire affair as a case of religious extremism that had been properly contained. The town of Millbrook itself gradually recovered, though longtime residents noted that the area around the former church remained strangely quiet. No birds nested in the trees there, no children played in the park that eventually replaced it. But stories persisted. Throughout the 1970s, residents reported occasional sightings of individuals standing at the edge of the park at night. People with unnaturally wide smiles who would simply watch the town before disappearing back into the darkness. Local doctors occasionally treated patients who exhibited small, systematic injuries that the patients themselves could not explain. And perhaps most troubling, children sometimes reported being approached by the smiling man or the smiling woman, who would tell them special secrets about how hurting can make you holy. These reports were never officially investigated. By then, Millbrook had developed an unspoken policy of silence about the events of 1954. As one town council member reportedly said in a closed session, "Some things are better left buried. We've moved on. Let the past stay in the past." The last documented connection to the Millbrook incident came in the form of a journal found in an abandoned house in northern Maine in 1979. The journal, attributed to someone identifying themselves only as a disciple of the path of holy pain, contained detailed accounts of experiences with Father Blackwood and the evolution of his teachings. The final entry read, "Father has shown us that what awaits beyond pain is not merely relief, but transcendence. Those of us who have followed his guidance to its conclusion now exist in a state beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. We walk among you, identified by our smiles, carrying the sacred knowledge. Father's physical presence is no longer necessary. His teaching lives in our transformed bodies, in our neural pathways that now process pain as divine ecstasy. We continue to spread this gift carefully, selectively. Look for our smiles. If you see us, and if you are ready, we will show you the path to perfect holiness." The journal was reportedly turned over to federal authorities, but no record of it exists in any official archive. The town of Millbrook still exists today, though its name was changed in 1983 as part of what official documents called a community rebranding effort. Local tourism materials make no mention of Father Blackwood or the events of 1954. The park that stands on the former church grounds is rarely visited, even on the most pleasant days, but residents still tell stories of the sounds sometimes heard from beneath the ground when the wind is still, of the people occasionally seen at the edge of town, standing perfectly motionless, their faces fixed in unnatural smiles. Of the children who sometimes wake in the night, claiming a smiling man or woman visited them and whispered secrets about pain and holiness. The last official document related to the Millbrook incident was dated 1968. No new records have been found. Some say none of this ever happened. Others prefer not to comment.